And you're all familiar with NAMI Tennessee, because my guess is most of you have joined this presentation before. NAMI is the national organization. Ironically, I work remotely from my home in Mississippi, so I'm not far from Tennessee. I'm talking with you today because I am the author of the NAMI Basics curriculum, the NAMI Basics program for parents and caregivers of children and adolescents with mental health conditions. So I'm pleased to be here, talk with you about the program, and answer whatever questions that people may have.
I just realized when I popped up the information for our upcoming class, it completely cut off your face. I apologize for that.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's the worst chyron in the placement in the history of NAMI Tennessee Facebook Lives. Thank you so much for being here. Listen, as we are going, if you have any questions, please type them into the comments. Shorter work better. We will try to get to as many questions as we can. But we have a ton of questions that were submitted before we got started. So don't worry, even if you don't have any questions, we have so much to cover with Teri. Teri, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this program. I imagine that writing a curriculum on this magnitude has to be extraordinarily difficult, but it, of course, has changed probably hundreds of thousands of lives over the past. When did NAMI Basics become a thing? When did this come out? It's been around for a while.
We launched the program in 2009. Is when we first rolled it out to families, and we're now in 44 of the 50 states. So it's exciting. And I've trained the teachers in all of those states. And then now we have a train the trainer model. So it's, yes, we're reaching a lot of people, not nearly enough. We still have way too many people who say, I wish I'd known about you sooner. So appreciate opportunities like this to be able to let people know what we have to offer.
Well, thank you. And your NAMI Basics is almost a teenager. What you put out of the world is turning 13 next year.
Oh, that kind of gives me a headache. But you know what that means.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into the first question. All right. The very first question we have is, how do you tell the difference between a typical challenging behavior and one that we need to be concerned about? Because, of course, we've all heard the famous adage, boys will be boys, girls will be girls, the teenage years, terrible teenagers. When does it cross the line into something that's not just growing pains?
That's a really good question. As a parent, I can tell you it was a question that I had for years as my children, who are all adults now, went through various phases. You mentioning basics being 13, we all know that it's kind of the job of a 13-year-old to be complicated, to be difficult, to be questioning authority. It's the job of a 2-year-old to be obstinate and stubborn and all of those things. What we tell parents is parents, teachers, and others that are involved with children is what you're really looking at is there a pattern? Is what's going on or what you're observing that's causing the child, first, is it causing the child difficulty? If it's just bothering you, then it might not be that big of a deal. Might be something that's more with you. But if whatever it is that you're noticing is causing the child difficulty or the adolescent difficulty, then you need to pay attention to it. And if it's something that's been going on for a period of time, rule of thumb is 2 weeks. If a bad mood or a really down mood has been lasting for 10 days to 2 weeks, you probably want to start asking questions, maybe talk with your pediatrician, but you're really looking for those two things. How much trouble is it causing your child at home, at school, with friends? And how long has it been going on? So those are really the two big ones.
You've sort of answered this question, but I want to give you a chance to expound on it, because it said, how do I know when it's time to see a mental health professional? I know that parents are worried and caregivers and family members, because we hear it all the time. Oh, we're just medicating children. Oh, anytime a child is difficult or creative, we just throw them on meds because they're annoying us. And I think people would like, I know you can't provide anything exactly concrete because every situation is different, but parents are naturally worried that they don't want to, there's a word that I'm looking for that I can't find. They don't want to turn every single thing their child does into a mental health
Mhm.
issue,
Mhm.
but they also don't want to miss it because that's equally terrifying for them.
And again, that you make such a good point. And I didn't mention this, but I'm a licensed professional counselor and worked at community mental health centers for years before coming to work at NAMI. So I'm a clinician by training. My husband is a psychiatrist. So you do naturally notice things that maybe not everybody else notices. And while you can't act on everything, you also can't ignore things either. Um, and it's, you know, I think about a colleague of mine, Ross Green, who's a psychologist, who we teach his problem solving technique in NAMI Basics. And he said about the course early on when we first launched, you know, come and learn more. If what you learn is that your child is just having typical problems, they're not having difficulties, great, good for you. But if they are in fact having difficulties, then you can learn some things that will help. By the same token, if you think about it in terms of getting help for your child rather than getting them mental health help or mental health treatment, I think that can be helpful. It's rare that people start out seeing a mental health clinician. Typically, with children and adolescents, especially, the first place we start is with our pediatrician. They're the one who knows our child the most. They see a lot of kids. They know what's typical versus atypical. Another option is starting with the school, with a school counselor or a school nurse, because again, you think about where our kids spend the majority of their time, and it's in the schools. So if you're noticing something, concerned about something, talk with someone else who cares about your child and who's in a position that they've been able to make observations as well.
I really liked what you said about the what do you have to, I don't think you phrased it this way, but what do you have to lose? Take the
Mhm.
class, go to the pediatrician. What's the worst case scenario? You get a checkup and they're
Mhm.
like, you're good.
Mhm.
I do think that more often than not, people believe that they can't see a mental health professional or go to the doctor for a mental health issue unless they themselves have diagnosed it. And of course, we don't feel this way about anything physical. If our child was, coughing for too long, we wouldn't say, well, until I know for a fact you have pneumonia, I'm not. No, it's just something is
Mhm.
bothering them. And then we're like, okay, let's get that checked out,
Mhm.
fully understanding that we don't know what we're going to hear. I think we need to adopt this with mental health as well.
You're absolutely correct. And at the end of the day, it's stigma. You know, we look at what you just said is so right. We look at challenges and even our own mental health. You know, there are so many memes, and I saw so many of them coming across social media over the weekend. It's okay to take a day off. It's okay to rest. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're lazy. We have to take care of ourselves. We things that we can't see, things that aren't obviously broken, we do tend to push off and think that it's going to be okay. Another thing that's especially difficult with children and adolescents is that so frequently we all view things differently. So it's not uncommon at all. As a matter of fact, it's very typical for caregivers to look at the child's behavior differently. You know, one of the parents may think there's something going on, you know, our son is depressed, and the other parent thinks, and I'm not saying mom or dad or mom and mom, because it or dad and dad, it can vary, but it's common for people to look at it differently. So when caregivers aren't necessarily on the same page about whether it's just the child being obstinate or being stubborn versus really having trouble, that makes it even harder. And there's something about saying, you know, I think we need to check on your mental health versus, you know, you've had this cold for 2 weeks. I think we need to go and get you checked out. It's different. And we have to look at it differently. And it's one of the silver linings, if you will, that we've observed at NAMI through the pandemic is we seem to have begun to realize that at the end of the day, we're all just human beings, and we're all susceptible to anxiety, to depression, to disturbances of mood when things in our life are a little out of control. And when you're a kid, you're really not in control of a whole lot.
That is very, very, very true. The next question along those same lines is how do you find a mental health professional? How do you and I think probably the question isn't like literally how do you but how do you select one? What's the criteria? For many people, this might be the first time ever going to any type of
Mhm.
mental health professional, and of course, the stakes are higher when it's our children.
And you couldn't be more right. I think we would all agree that we worry a whole lot more about the things that we do for our kids than we do for ourselves. And there really are two questions. One is how do you find somebody, period? And then how do you find the right fit? Because the reality is there aren't enough mental health professionals in the country. There are in Mississippi, for example, where I am, a few years ago, we had less than a dozen child psychiatrists in the whole entire state. I'm not sure what it's like in Tennessee, and typically those mental health professionals are clustered around Memphis or around Knoxville or around Nashville. They're not out in the rural communities. So literally finding somebody to provide the services, will they fit, and are they who you want to see, is sadly almost a luxury. But starting with your pediatrician, not pediatricians, general practitioners are the major prescriber of antidepressants across the country. They treat a lot of people who are having anxiety, who are having depression. Pediatricians are very familiar with what's typical versus what's not, and what they can handle in their scope of practice versus what they think needs to be referred to a child psychiatrist, and then they can make recommendations on people who are available. It can be extremely confusing. Part of one of the basics classes is all about what's the difference? What's the difference in a counselor and a clinician and a social worker and a therapist and a psychologist and a psychiatrist? It's confusing. We use a lot of jargon in the healthcare space, period, but especially in the mental health care space. So the best suggestion is to start with somebody you know and trust, your pediatrician or someone at the school, because I guarantee you people at the school will know who's in your community and who's available.
Now, this can be a daunting task to talk to the school. It's not so easy, and several people seized onto that, and they're like, "Well, how do I talk to my child's school about my concern?" And stigma is always a subtext of these conversations, and I know many parents are afraid of talking to the school and getting their kid labeled as a problem child, the sensitive child, the just some sort of label that prevents their child from having a fair chance to negotiate their case or to move forward, because teachers, they're human as well, and they're
Hmm.
susceptible to all of the same beliefs. It's like, well, I don't know that I want little Johnny to be on the chess team because he's prone to outbursts. Well, why do you feel that way? Well, his mom said that he was bipolar. It's like, did his mom say that, or did you hear that? Is that the conversation you have with the parent? And parents, especially parents who have been educated, are super concerned about saying the wrong thing.
Hmm.
So how do I talk to my child's school about my child's mental health concerns?
And and the common theme here, Gabe, is that it's all complicated.
Yeah.
If you've noticed that every question you've brought up, every comment you've made, it's complicated. And you're so correct that at the end of the day, the people at the school system, the teachers, the nurses, the principals, the psychologists, whoever you're dealing with, are people who have their own belief systems and their own expectations. So it can be hard. We have an entire class devoted to helping parents and family caregivers, because the course isn't just for parents. You may be a grandparent, you may be a step parent, an aunt, an uncle, but you're involved in the day-to-day care with the child. We have a whole class on how do you embrace the school system? How do you embrace them as an ally rather than going in and trying to butt heads, if you will? Frequently, and this may surprise you, it may not, but we hear almost as frequently that a school wants to do something for the child and the parent or one of the parents is a little hesitant. So what's in the best interest of the child is if everybody's on the same page, even if they disagree about the details, but we want what's in the best interest of the child. The concern about labeling gets even more complicated with school age children, because if whether you're in a gifted program or whether you're in some kind of a remedial program at a school because of a learning disability, that's all under special education. And special education has its own flavor of stigma attached to it. The other complicated thing is my child may have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, which is a pretty severe disorder, especially for a child or for a youth, but that doesn't automatically qualify them for special ed at the school. They have to be evaluated through an entirely separate process. So it really is complex. It's frustrating for the parent. It's frustrating for the child. And what we tell parents all the time in schools when we have the opportunity to talk to them is you have to reel the frustration in and remember that you're focusing on what's best for the child. And it's tough to get there, but you've got to have that end point in mind if you're going to make it. And many times it does take parents going to the school repeatedly. You become that parent. Well, here she comes again. There's Teri. She's driving up. But you can't give up on your child, and if you do it respectfully and, as we tell parents in the basics course, with a smile, and just help them understand that you want to be part of the solution.
Thank you so much, Teri. Now, I know we've talked a lot about what Basics covers and how Basics can help you and how Basics can manage, and that's fantastic. But it occurred to me we never actually covered what Basics was, aside from saying that it was a class that NAMI offers, that many NAMIs across the country offer. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. What is NAMI Basics?
Perfect. And interesting. We're halfway into this, and we get to that question. NAMI offers a series. We offer a number of education programs and support programs for people who are affected by mental illness. That's the individuals who experience symptoms, as well as the people who care about them and love them. We have a program that's been around for almost 30 years called NAMI Family to Family, and Basics is built off of the NAMI Family to Family program. They're taught by peers. So what that means is if you're in the Family to Family program, those classes are taught by family members of people with mental illness. They don't necessarily have training as mental health professionals. They might, but they teach that course because they have the lived experience. NAMI Basics is a 6-session course that was designed specifically for parents and other family caregivers of children and adolescents with mental health conditions or symptoms of mental health conditions. It's not necessary that your child have a diagnosis for you to take the class, for you to take the course. It is an evidence-based practice, or almost an evidence-based practice. We have the research that's done on it that shows that it does help people who take the course feel more empowered. They understand more about problem-solving skills. They understand more about the mental health conditions themselves. We're waiting on that to be accepted for publication in a journal to actually say that it's evidence-based. But the course is taught by parents or grandparents. So for example, when I teach the course, I'm a mental health professional, I work at NAMI, but when I teach as a parent, as a grandparent, as an aunt of people who had symptoms when they were young. So it doesn't matter that my children are 30 and 34. I talk about what the experience was like when they were young, when they were in school, how we navigated that. So it's really all about, it's referred to as psychoeducation, because we're teaching people about the conditions, we're teaching them facts, but we're also teaching them how to live the best life possible above and beyond those facts, if you will. So how do you, it's not that we teach people to embrace what's going on, but how do you understand it, incorporate it into your life, so that you can manage the best that you can for yourself and your child. And one of the big things with Basics is teaching parents that you have to take care of yourself first. And we use the analogy of the oxygen mask on an airplane. When you're in the olden days, when we all used to fly all the time pre-COVID, the stewardess always says, if you're with a child or an elderly person, put your oxygen mask on first. You can't save somebody else if you can't breathe. We remind parents of that all through the course, because as parents, we feel guilty for taking care of ourselves. But if you don't and you burn out, then who is going to be advocating with the school or advocating with the healthcare system?
It's always a very difficult thing, I think, for anybody, especially for parents, because stakes are higher. It's children, right? I think all of us feel an extra responsibility towards children, period. Not our own children, just children as a whole. And it does seem counterintuitive that you have to take care of yourself. But I always explain to people, I was like, okay, look, do you want the firefighter to show up to put your house out, who is well rested, exercised, well fed, is ready to go? Or do you want the firefighter to show up who's been up for 5 days because he has to do or she has to do all of the fires and won't sleep because they have to study fires and they have to learn more and they have to practice with the hose. And by the time they get to your house, they haven't slept in a week and they're just mad at everything. And of course, they're making bad decisions. And not only could that hurt them, which would be devastating for a child, it could hurt the person that you're trying to help. So while it does sound counterintuitive, it's self-advocacy is advocacy.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for that. The next question that we have is, we hear mental health conditions and mental illness all the time. And oftentimes we also just hear, well, I have mental health. And whenever people say mental health, they always imply that it's bad. And I know there's a lot of education that mental health is just like physical health, right? It's on a spectrum. Some mental health can be good, some mental health can be bad, and of course everything in between. But what is the difference between mental health conditions and mental illness? Because they are sort of used interchangeably, and that is not correct.
And we could almost make you a commercial for NAMI, Gabe. And also another tough question, because I've been in the mental health field for a lot of years, in a lot of different roles. And we have been debating within the field as long as I've been involved about what do we call people? What do we call the conditions? Is a person with a mental illness or a mental health condition a patient? Are they a peer? Are they a consumer? Are they a client? Words matter. They matter an awful lot, but we can also get really caught up in the words. Serious mental illness is a term that was used for years, and it was really a definition that came down through SAMHSA as a funding thing. There's a whole big book. Some of them are on my bookshelf behind me, a diagnostic and statistical manual that has a lot of diagnoses in it that are all based on observations. What are people experiencing? What's been observed? What symptoms do they have, etc. Many years ago, several of those conditions were designated as serious mental illness for adults. Some of those conditions were designated as serious emotional disturbance for children and adolescents, and those were the ones that block grant money could be used to pay for. So like so many things, it can come down to funding in terms of labeling. But then it became, okay, is my depression worse or not as bad as somebody who has a diagnosis of major depression that's a serious mental illness? So you get into all of that. So NAMI has always just referred to it as mental illness. Basics was the first thing that kind of blew up in our face on, because I wrote the course, and it was originally for children and adolescents with mental illness, and parents and schools went out the roof. My kid has ADHD. He doesn't have a mental illness. Nobody wanted to use the term mental illness as it related to children because of the label. We ran into that again when we developed a program for service members and veterans. Service members and veterans, let's not call it mental illness. So we began actually using the term mental health conditions, mental illnesses, mental health disorders, interchangeably to try and demonstrate that regardless of what you call it, what you call the cluster of diagnoses, it's when there's something that's going on with your mental well-being that's causing difficulty in your life. And you said something early on, mental health is physical health. You can't have one without the other. It is interchangeable. And frequently you hear people saying, I'm having difficulties with my mental health. So there's really, from NAMI's perspective, from my perspective, I've never found a term that pleases everybody. And it's hard to talk about. But the biggest thing is looking at it rather than, and we try to teach people this as well, to not focus on the label and to focus more on the challenges it's causing in your life, if that helps. It's a hard question.
It's fascinating to me because on one hand, we need to have open, unabashed conversations about mental illness. We must not be ashamed. But then when people start doing it, we're like, no, not that way. Not with those words. No, you're saying it wrong. No, correction. And it's like, what are you doing? You just said that we need to have unfiltered, unabashed conversations about mental illness, and we're all standing around arguing semantics. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating, and it's part of the reason. This is Teri's opinion, okay, not NAMI's opinion. Let the record reflect. But it's part of the reason that we have the inequity that we do in our healthcare system, because for so many years we've had different advocacy groups pushing different points and quibbling, if you will, over what can feel major to you, but in the big picture may not be. Whereas for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancer, people who are affected by those conditions are all on the same page, and they don't splinter, if you will. But it makes it hard when you're advocating for policy changes and each group is saying different things and using different language. It just, so you're right. It's complicated.
It's very, very complicated. I've been fond of explaining to people, if anybody that had any connection to mental illness, mental health conditions, whatever words that you want to use, if all of us came together tomorrow, we'd still be this tiny margin. And not a voting block, not enough to maybe enough to sway an election, but certainly not 50%. I mean, we're small, and we're all fractured out, so we're even smaller. Mm-hmm. It's definitely something that we do need to come together on, and I'm really a firm believer that if you're discussing it, there is the magic. Context is by far more important to me than the actual words. And I do believe that deep down, most of us know it. It's just an easy talking point on social media. Don't know what to say to somebody? Just attack their language. Mm-hmm. And I do think that we need to move past it. And I agree with you. Gabe Howard's opinion, I'm going to do it too. So, we're both fired. I don't know what happened.
It was nice while it lasted, right?
It was. Let's move on. Let's keep moving on in basics. One of the questions is, okay, well, you said that there's so many words, there's so many conditions, there's so many diagnoses. So you can't possibly cover them all. What is covered in basics?
Again, think about the 6 classes that are there. Half of one class, and each class is about 2.5 hours in length. Half of one class talks about specific diagnoses, and we cover the most commonly diagnosed: ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, bipolar disorder, conduct disorder. Again, we cover 10 or 11 of the most commonly diagnosed conditions. And one of the things that we do, we go through it's a checklist that was developed based on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And again, we teach parents about that because the average person doesn't know how a diagnosis is made. There's no X-ray, there's no blood test. There are tests out there, but they don't definitively diagnose. They can let you know who might have a predisposition, but they don't definitively diagnose. So we have fact sheets that are general information about each of these 10 or 11, I believe it's 10, diagnoses that we cover in the program. And the point that we make at the end of that section of the course is, do you see how confusing it can be? Because some of the symptoms can be overlapping and some of the symptoms are very similar. And you really do have to look at the full picture of the child or the adolescent. You have to look at what's happening at school. You have to look at what's happening at home. So again, we cover the most common, but use it as a teachable moment to say that's why as parents you really have to focus on what's going on with the child, because diagnoses change with kids. Our brain change. Your brain's the only organ that's not fully formed when you're born. It's just not. And for some of us, it's still cooking, right? I mean, it's technically not done until we're 25 or so.
Oh, wow.
And what we know now is that our brain continues to change. We continue to prune and make adaptations even into older adulthood. So it's never, we're never done. So diagnoses change for that reason, because they're made based on what you're doing now, what you're experiencing right now.
One of the questions that came up is, why might a parent consider taking NAMI Basics? And does a parent have to have a child with a diagnosis? Is suspicion enough? Is there any criteria for a parent taking NAMI Basics?
Suspicion is plenty. Suspicion or concern, or just wanting to learn more. Maybe mental illness runs, bipolar disorder runs in my family. You know, maybe mental illness runs in your family. You've seen some things about your child that you're concerned about, so you want to learn more. There's not a specific diagnosis that's required. It's not, you don't have to have custody paperwork for a child. Again, if you're the aunt or the uncle that wants to take the course to learn something about an adolescent that's in your life, you can do that. We don't, one of the questions that NAMI Tennessee or NAMI in whatever state you happen to live in will ask you, you know, why are you interested in the course? If you're interested in coming because the person that you love and care about is 30, then you probably don't need basics. You need NAMI family to family. But if the person that you're interested in and concerned about is younger than 21 and is having some kind of difficulties and you want to learn more, that's literally all it takes. No paperwork, no documentation, no referral, none of those things. That's the beauty of NAMI. Coming from the service provider world, that's the beauty of NAMI. We just provide support, education for people who want it.
Oh, it's beautiful. It is. It's absolutely free. Everything at NAMI Tennessee provides 100% free across the entire state. A question that comes up, we frame this in terms of parents. I know that I've said it at least a dozen times, but is NAMI Basics only for parents? What about other family members like grandparents or aunts and uncles? So I think the question is it only for primary caregivers, or is it also for the other adults in a child's life?
Again, a very good question. And it's easy to say parents and use that kind of universally, but I'm glad that you asked. The course is actually for parents and other family caregivers. You don't have to be a primary caregiver. Again, you may be the aunt or the uncle. You may be the grandparent who lives next door. You may be the next door neighbor who provides childcare for your 7-year-old neighbor when his parents are out of town or when parents are working and you want to understand more about what's going on the child. We specifically try to make the separation between having that familial caregiver relationship with the child versus having a professional relationship with the child. So for example, if I'm a school social worker, but I don't have kids of my own and I want to take the course, I can't take the course with family members. Many places offer NAMI Basics for groups of professionals only. The reason that we don't allow professional caregivers to come into the course with families is we very much want families to feel comfortable talking about whatever they want to talk about. They may have had a bad experience with the social worker, and if there's a professional social worker in the class, they may not feel comfortable talking about it because they don't want to hurt the person in the class's feelings. So we do, but as long as there's some kind of a family, social, caring relationship with someone who's younger than 21, then you can come. You're eligible.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, I know you touched on this a little earlier, so it is sort of slingshotting back. You mentioned that our brains don't really stop developing until we're about 25. So I'm sure that's going to factor heavily into the answer to this question. But parents and caregivers and adults are concerned about how often the diagnosis changes with children and adolescents. And it makes some people think, oh, well, the provider doesn't know what they're doing because this year it was X and next year it was Y. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk on that a little more, because I can understand why parents are concerned when they keep hearing all of these very scary things that changes from week to week, from month to month, to year. Can you talk about why they change so frequently in children and adolescents?
Yes. Again, I keep waiting on the easy questions, Gabe, and they're not coming.
They're not coming.
They're not coming. They're not here. And I think about Steve Hyman, who is the director of psychiatric research at the Broad Institute. He worked with us on some advocacy issues around brain science several years ago at NAMI. And he said, the brain is hard. The brain is complicated. And because until we have definitive diagnostic tools like blood tests, MRIs, PET scans, something that will allow us to definitively diagnose what's going on, it's always going to be as an art as much as it is a science, if you will, to make a diagnosis. So it is frustrating. It is scary. It can leave us as parents not having a lot of confidence in the treatment world, in the behavioral health treatment world. Most frequently, diagnoses don't typically change a couple of times a year or a couple of times a month. Frequently, it's over a period of years. For one of the biggest examples is, and this is true for adults as well, is someone may come in for treatment because they're having a lot of trouble with depression. They can't get out of bed. They have no energy. They've lost their appetite. And that's all that's presenting to the psychiatrist or the psychologist or the clinician. And that's all they talk about. That's all the family tells the clinician about. And they put them on an antidepressant. And then in a couple of weeks, they have a manic episode. In fact, the person had a bipolar disorder, but that wasn't known until the depression was treated. So that's one reason that frequently we learn a little bit more about what a condition is when a treatment doesn't work. And it's sad to say that it's trial and error, but in a lot of ways it is. But I want people to understand that it's the art. It's taking what we know scientifically and looking at the picture that's painted. And it's why it's so important for families to be involved in the treatment and the diagnostic process, and for the school to be involved, so that the treating professional can get the best, fullest picture possible about what's really going on with the kid. Not just the mom's lens, not just the grandparents' lens, not just the school's lens, but what's happening everywhere. So again, you have diagnosis changes that happen because something was misdiagnosed to begin with. More frequently, you have diagnoses change because symptoms evolve.
Thank you. Thank you so much for covering that. Unfortunately, the next question does not get any easier. So I thought I'd give you a small break by pointing that out. Big, deep breath. One of the questions that always comes up is there something parents should have done differently to prevent mental health issues or mental illness in their children? There is, of course, the stigma is so pervasive in our society that for the longest time, people just blamed mothers. All mental illness came from mother. And even though the psychiatrist who had a hypothesis of this long dead, we still, for some reason, quote him as fact. I know that you want to address this because it is, of course, it's very unfortunate that the parents would take any blame outside of, genetic. I mean, and that's nobody's fault, right?
It's and again, another hard question, hard for different reasons. We are, and if we're the birth parent, we are responsible for our child's genes, for their genetic makeup. But it's not that we've intentionally done something wrong.
Right.
But it can feel that way as parents. And I think about my son when he was in the third grade, realized that he was having difficulty with baseball. He was having difficulty at school. Was it a football game one Friday night? Couldn't read the scoreboard. He needed glasses. We didn't know he needed glasses. And I beat myself up for months about that. As his parent, I should have known. And that's an easily diagnosable thing, but it's so similar for anything that's going on with our kids. We think if we just knew what we could have done that we didn't do, or what we did that we shouldn't have done, if we just knew the cause, that somehow it would make us feel better and somehow it would make more sense. And as the parent, again, we just automatically do beat ourselves up. We just do. The reality is that very frequently, very infrequently, is there something that could have been done differently. We know, in fact, that some children are abused physically, sexually. We know that some children are living in less than healthy living situations, or in foster care, or in, again, less than a Beaver Cleaver type household. And many of your listeners today probably don't even know who Beaver Cleaver was. But I realized that as soon as I said it. But, they don't live in a perfect world. Right. But some of those kids come out doing fine and don't develop behavioral difficulties. And other kids who live in what looks like an ideal household and family do. So we try to help. It's one of the big things, again, that we do at NAMI, is trying to help families understand that this isn't anybody's fault. It's not something you did or didn't do. It's not something your child did. It's not something your ex-spouse did. It is what it is. What's important is that everybody work together to get the best care possible for the child going forward. But it's such a natural feeling to feel like you as a parent should be able to fix everything. And if something went wrong, it must be because you didn't do your job. That's because we're human beings. But it's part of what we have to learn to get over as well. And it's a big part of all of NAMI's classes, not just basics, even the one for parents of adults with mental illness. The Family to Family program is all about letting go of the guilt, because and some of us, raised in the South, I do guilt really, really well. I was raised by experts at guilt, and I do it well. So I practice what I preach.
Teri, thank you so much. We're about out of time, and we are out of questions. You made it through all of them, so I hope that this last question, which is mine, is easier. Do you have any messages, any information, any inspirational thoughts that you want to get out to people who are watching this, that maybe you're on the fence, maybe aren't sure what to expect, they just don't know? Because I know that a journey of 1,000 miles has to begin with a single step, but that single step is really, really hard.
It is really hard. I think about, we're going into the holidays. We're going into a time where kids were just out of school, some of them for a week. In a couple of more weeks, they're going to be out for 2 weeks. They're going to be home. Things are going to be kind of chaotic. So don't make rash decisions about what's going on with your child based on the next couple of weeks. But if you've been concerned about something, I would encourage you, regardless of what your relationship is with the child, if you're concerned, learn more. Get some more information. Basics is actually available in an on-demand version. You can go to NAMI.org/basics and take the course online. Oh, wow. Contact NAMI Tennessee, or wherever you're listening from. There's a NAMI organization in every state. We've got 650 affiliates. Get more information. With the internet available now, even through smartphones, even if you have a minimal plan, you can usually learn something. Learn more. Don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to ask the question. And just remind yourself when you're feeling anxious, embarrassed, whatever words you want to use, that you're doing this on behalf of your child. You really are not just making an investment in their future, but it would be just like getting them treatment for any other kind of, or getting them checked out for any other kind of physical ailment. So don't be afraid to do it.
Thank you, Teri, so much. And of course, NAMI Tennessee is offering the class. I'm popping up a nice flyer right here, the statewide NAMI Basics program leader training. Who should enroll? Individuals want to help parents, caregivers, and other family members who provide care for youth ages 22 and younger who are experiencing mental health symptoms. The next class is by Zoom, December 3rd through 5th. And I've been popping up Denise Stewart's information the whole time, but it's there again. You can email her at dstewart@namitn.org, or of course, give her a phone call at 615-361-6608. And that's a train the trainer type program, again, available via Zoom. And I know you're a big advocate in that, Teri, because of course, everybody who needs it, we want the class to be available, and that really does start with our volunteer base, because it's 100% free. So if we don't get the volunteers, obviously we can't offer the classes. So big round of applause and kudos to our volunteers. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And if you're on the fence, just contact Denise. Sincerely, I want to pop her information up one more time. Even if you're not sure, contact Denise, talk to her, ask her. But what can people expect in the Train the Trainer program?
And I'll tell you that, but I just want to give a shout out to Denise and Roger both. I mean, NAMI Tennessee for years has done some of the best programming of any NAMI organization in the country. And much of that has been under the leadership of Denise and her husband, Roger. They do phenomenal programs. They take care of the volunteers. They give them what they need to be able to teach. What you can expect from this training is being trained to teach the course. How do you use your lived experience? And I don't want people to be nervous. We feel like that part of our job as the trainer is getting parents, family members comfortable sharing the information we give them to share. It's all scripted out. The training lets you practice. You get used to everything you need is right there in front of you in a book. We don't just say, here's a PowerPoint, and I go out and teach people, do good things. And without exception, every training I've ever done, and I can't tell you how many people I've trained over the years for different programs, every training I've ever done, the majority of the people who are learning to teach, who want to be able to give back, say that their primary reason for doing it is they want to be able to save one family from some of the delayed treatment, the delayed intervention, the extra steps. I hear it all the time. If I can make it easier for one family, then it's worth it. And people tell us consistently that they get just as much out of teaching and running the support groups as the people taking the classes.
I can tell you that my ex-wife, she was my wife at the time, so the story didn't age well, but she taught the class for she taught family to family for 5 turns, and the NAMI affiliate was desperate, so they approached her because she had taken the family to family and of course was married to me, and she said, well, I can't do it, it's way too difficult. And she is not an extrovert in any sense of the word, and but she agreed to take, they said, well, you take the course or take the Train the Trainer, and if at the end you don't want to, you don't have to. So it's very important to point that out. And she was so thoroughly prepared and so ready that, like I said, she taught the 5 before she moved away. And she and I are still friends. Lisa is a wonderful person. So While we are not married anymore, I do feel the need to point out that she is very supportive of me. And again, the core feature of that is that she just did not want to, but because of my involvement with NAMI, they felt comfortable, giving her the hug that lasted just a little extra long while they said, you'd be good at this. Now, I know that's family to family, but it's the train the trainer programs, whether it's family to family, basics, connections, all the NAMI programs, they really, really do prepare you. I like what you said there, Teri. They don't hand you a PowerPoint and tell you to go off and
Exactly.
do a good job. So sincerely, if you're on the fence, please do it. I want to pop this on the screen one more time. That's what you need. And yes, Denise and Roger are absolutely wonderful. If you are interested in that, please sign up. All right, Teri, you made it to the end. Are you ready to get out of here?
I appreciate the invitation, and yes. This has been great. This has been great. You took the pressure off, and I appreciate the folks who joined, and hope it's been helpful for someone.
Well, I am absolutely certain that has been helpful for many people. If you are interested, cannot contact Denise Stewart. There is the information. Also, I say it every single time, so y'all should be used to it by now. Sign up for our email list. That's how you find out about basics, family to family connections, in our own voice, legislative advocacy things, all of the things that NAMI Tennessee is doing that, once again, is absolutely free and very powerful for our community in making life better for people who live with mental illness and, of course, their families. And finally, because everything is free and we are a charity, please support us on Giving Tuesday. If you are watching it live, that is tomorrow. If you're watching the replay, it could be any day because that's how replays work. But you can text NAMI TN to 615-709-6009 to donate to NAMI Tennessee's Giving Tuesday campaign. It's on your mobile device, and we would really appreciate it. As we get out of here, I'm going to leave Denise's information up so that you have it, and we will see everybody next Monday at 2 Central, 3 Eastern on NAMI Tennessee at Home Live. Thank you. Wave goodbye, Teri.